The idea of a creature larger than a gorilla with an odor like a skunk might seem far-fetched.
From the beginning of his time on Earth, man has always been fascinated by monsters, real or imagined.
The outside world is very judgmental about these things, with many people not believing in them whatsoever.
Cloaked in secrecy, they show up without warning, state their business, then vanish as quickly as they appear.
They only land in isolated places. They have taken people, I believe. They do have technology.
But the idea is if enough people focus on something, like thousands and thousands of people focus their mind on something and the image, in a very strange way, they can kind of create a real world version of the fictional entity.
Fact, fantasy, and history have come together to tease the imagination.
That the truth will out, and that no one lie can live forever.
Welcome to Super Normal. And welcome to Super Normal, Super NRML. I'm your host, Sean the Fork Chop Forker, joined by my friends, Vance Nesbitt and Travis Quarter, Maz and Baker, both on assignment tonight. And if they say that fast, it sounds kind of dirty. Mazda Baker. So, guys, we've had a tumultuous evening before we even started recording tonight. How the hell are both of you? I miss you guys.
I'm doing pretty well here. Had a pretty non-eventful week, but just been kind of relaxed and doing some writing and doing some research for this episode. Looking forward to getting going.
Absolutely. Vance?
Well, being that I'm in the Central Time Zone and you're in the Eastern Time Zone, you already know how I'm doing because you're in the future. You've already experienced 7 p.m. I have not, so you already know how I am. But it is a nice segue into this events topic at our dimensional doorstep. And for everyone who needs to truly understand the term dimensional and interdimensional, I think we have those definitions probably visually in our head, but if you were to verbalize it out loud, it may be a little bit more of a difficult challenge. In my research into this event at our dimensional doorstep, we're going to be touching base with things like the ultra-terrestrial and unexplained entities. And it got me thinking to go down not too far of a rabbit hole, but things that might make sense. So then I go back to my personal hero, Dr. Michio Kaku, who is a physicist. And if you are not familiar with him, I encourage you to at least look him up on YouTube and just listen to 5 minutes of something that he says, because as a physicist, he explains everything in a very lighthearted and layman's terms. And he was explaining about multiverses and how he can put that into a visual format for all of us to have a better understanding about how these things may be. So he said when he was a child, he was looking at a typical Japanese koi pond. It's shallow, and there were koi fish in there. And he looked at the koi fish, and he realized that they live in 2 dimensions. They can move forward and backwards. They can move left and right. And their eyes are on the side of their head, but they have no concept of up. So then, Sean, if you were to walk over to that koi pond and take one of the koi out of the water, and it gets to see other koi ponds with creatures similar to it, that is expanding that koi's reality, that there are other universes other than its own. But then it looks at you as this dry creature with 2 legs and 2 arms, and it's completely unfamiliar to it whatsoever. And then you put the koi back in the pond again, and it's back in its normal relative universe. And so to start tonight's discussion off about what I categorize as the ultra-terrestrial, I find it really fascinating because I think a lot of entities and a lot of people's personal experiences may fall in that category of something that may come from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Now, through science, the launching of the Hubble Space Telescope. Now, a lot of people understood that the Hubble Space Telescope was doing just that. It's a telescope to look at our universe and look at stars and other galaxies and planets. But the primary mission of the Hubble Space Telescope was to explore something known as dark matter. And it has mapped our universe of where dark matter is. Dark matter, if you are unfamiliar with it, is untangible to us. It does not consist of matter, and we cannot see it. But it's there, and we know it's there because it gives off gravity. In our physics, the only thing that can give off gravity is mass, and a very large quantity of mass will create gravity. So with the koi pond experience, since the Hubble Space Telescope is mapped out our universe of the majority of our universe being dark matter, all the light from our universe projects outward. If the light were to project into our universe, we may be able to see what's causing the dark matter. And that may be the dimension in which the ultra-terrestrial is able to tear time and space and come to our universe. And it's very possible because we are so close to touching what dark matter is and discovering it and confirming what it is and what's causing this gravity that we cannot see. And I find that a great door to open, no pun intended, but it's a great door to open to say, maybe that's where the Mothman comes from. Maybe that's where these shadow beings come from. Maybe that's where a lot of paranormal experiences that people have come from. But, you know, that's open for the discussion here as to any stories you may have uncovered about ultra-terrestrials that may come from another dimension. Travis, you have anything that may even be close to that as far as an ultra-terrestrial or an experience or people that have had certain type of an experience?
Well, I don't have a specific case of that. I do have we can take a look briefly at the superstring theory idea that we could actually have 10 dimensions available to us, and we're only currently aware of 4. To go over that very briefly, superstring theory, this is according to an article by Philip Perry on bigthink.com. But superstring theory states that there are 10 dimensions. There's 1 of time and 9 of space. Now, if that were the case, just the type of thing you would see in the 5th dimension, the 4th dimension being time, is in the 5th dimension, we'd be able to travel backward and forward through time, and we'd also be able to see differences among different dimensions, which is huge to have that opened. In the 5th and 6th dimensions, this theory states that we could actually see every single possible version of past, present, and future from anywhere in space. Once you get out to the 7th, 8th, and 9th, we would possibly begin to see the other universes, and at that point, we would actually see the very physical forces of nature change. This theory also states once you hit the 8th dimension, we would see, quote, all possible histories and futures for each universe, branching out into infinity. 9th dimension looks at how all universal laws of physics and the conditions in each universe become apparent to us. And in the 10th, literally everything is possible and imaginable, which is just unbelievably mind-blowing to think that that many dimensions could exist. And if they could, I would suggest it is very possible that this is how other beings, if they're contacting us, are contacting us. Mm-hmm. There's a belief that UFOs, if interstellar travel is not possible, there's the belief that this actually helps explain the existence of not so much extraterrestrials, but just shifting the term to call them ultra-terrestrials to travel among dimensions.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. In fact, guys, on the advert for this show, John Keel's prominently featured in the background. Kind of faded into the background, but, Keel postulated that these beings came from window areas throughout the world and connected our reality with parallel dimensions. And we're not going to explore the dimensions. However, we're going to explore these strange creature sightings, right? He wrote a book, Strange Creatures of Time and Space, which you could check out. It's available on Amazon.com, another shameless plug. And the idea that these windows open up and these beings come through, are they controlled? Are they random? I don't know. Let me give you an example. There have been sightings in Pennsylvania of Bigfoot creatures that are wearing these belts that have some sort of control device. There's also beings in Pennsylvania where these things are seen carrying an orb of light. One investigator, Dwayne Pintoff, a good friend of mine, who I've interviewed several times, and I've researched with Dwayne pretty well, he actually saw a window type open up and saw something disappear through it. Not a full being, a full apparition, but like a partial. And that's pretty telling when you have credible investigators coming forward and saying they've observed this themselves. Dr. Paul Johnson, a professor from Duquesne University, is a big perspective of the quantum Bigfoot. You know, that this has the ability to shift between the dimensions. So we have to consider, no matter, I think, your level of where you're at with research, are you a flesh and blood investigator like myself, where you think these things have terrestrial origins, they're real, they are native to our land, you can't throw out all the instances of the paranormal or supernormal aspects of the creature. There are sightings, a lot of sightings, especially on the Chestnut Ridge in the southwestern part of the state. At least in Pennsylvania, that's what I'll speak to because that's the research I've done of these things happening. As a researcher, Vance, Travis, and I know, Travis, you'll say you don't have a whole lot of chops in this investigating, but you do have a lot of common sense. What do you do with those reports that say something faded in and out of our quote-unquote reality?
Well, I think for starters, you have to take them very seriously. I don't believe that these are people who have any notion of becoming wildly famous for being the first person to make the scientific world take something seriously that they're suggesting. I think that they just want the truth out there, and I do believe that a lot of these people are seeing very strange phenomena. So I think the first thing to do is to sit down with them, walk with them, talk with them, listen to what they have to say, process that, and then determine your next step forward with the investigation.
You know, and Sean, you brought up a good point too with witnesses that see what it may even be a doorway. But then I go back to the Skinwalker Ranch and what the NIBS Science Research was doing, and they had testimony of seeing an orb of light that would expand and saw a couple of creatures that kind of, to me personally, the way it was described, kind of representing a Bigfoot type of creature that came through. And they could not follow where it was because they were scoping on this thing that was happening. But if that's the case, then if it came through, it's very possible that it is a flesh and blood creature. It just may be flesh and blood in more than one place too. And so you do have to take at least those stories seriously, because it may sound absolutely crazy now, but maybe 100 years from now, it won't be crazy at all. If we were to go back to Victorian time period and hand anybody a working cellular device that you could talk to anybody in the world, and it has a plethora of every bit of information you could possibly ask it, they would look at you like you're nuts. But with these witness encounters that have been happening, like you said, along the Chestnut Ridge is a wonderful example of some crazy things that have happened. There are endless amounts of UFO reports and Bigfoot creatures that seem to run simultaneously with each other. Is it one has to do with the other? Maybe not, but there is probably a good chance that maybe it does. And I think that falls in the same category along with, like you said, with John Keel writing about the Mothman prophecies. That's why he got so wrapped up in that entire story, because now there's an event happening that might be tangible that he could hold in his hand. And he wrote about it and kind of put those dimensional lights to that story as maybe this is how we can find the answer to what this being, creature, whatever it might be, could be. It might even be flesh and blood. It might be flesh and blood between two places at the same time, and that might be perfectly normal. We don't know. Just because we experience our own universe doesn't mean that we don't go swim in the ocean. To us, that's an entirely different environment. That's a different universe. Fish only know the ocean as their universe. We can dive into it and experience, so we can move back and forth between those two universes and be okay with that. A fish generally doesn't do that. It doesn't have that understanding to be able to climb up on land and walk around and go shopping. It doesn't have that. And we may be the fish in the ocean. And there's another entity that's stepping in and may not be malevolent at all. I don't know. What's your take?
I think a lot of times, because we can't comprehend something, it's not possible. Do you know what I mean? Like, it kind of reminds me of that Arthur C. Clarke quote, "Any sufficient advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." In our comprehension of things today, things can't exist because we can't comprehend it. We lose a little bit of that awe and wonder every day when our technology grows and we think we understand a lot more than we do. It's even like physics now. How many people really, truly understand physics? And that a lot of physics is still theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we think we do, we think we're there, but we might be wrong. Tomorrow somebody could come along with a whole new idea and blow everything we knew out of the water. That's kind of the beauty of science, but I feel that even though we want to be expounded in scientific wonder, we really want to quash that by having a thirst for knowledge immediately, and because we can't understand it, it's not possible right now, or it's not possible at all. And we talk about these things like these dimensional doorways or these abilities because we have not that ability. Nothing else can.
Right. Now, I know I used flesh and blood, and it's very possible that it is flesh and blood, but there's a lot of encounters that it seems a little far-fetched that it's flesh and blood. It seems that these entities, and I'm just using air quotes around entity because what term can I use to better describe it as an entity, seem to move and have shape-shifting abilities. And I'm not talking about, from a human to a dog. I'm not. And that may be part of this category too. But I'm talking about something that seems semi-transparent, but yet metamorphoses itself into something that's tangible and solid, and you can't see through it. And then it's able to move to different levels. And I know somebody, you know somebody too, Sean, that I shared with you, and I shared with another individual that they called it an ultra-terrestrial, because this person was able to capture a photograph after the experience. And actually, the photograph I've looked at, it's very convincing. It's not hoaxed. I've showed it to a couple of photo analysis now, and they do not deem anything as a reflection or anything bizarre or Photoshop. That they can tell right away. Whatever was in this picture that looks like similar to an alien creature, that's the best I can put it. It looks like the typical type of gray alien creature, a very large head and big, large eyes. But it's slightly fuzzy because of the way the picture is zoomed in to look at the creature. It kind of pixelates a little bit. But the way it's manifested itself in a window, looking out the window, proportionally doesn't make sense because its legs would be hanging through the floor below it in this building. And maybe this ultra-terrestrial just doesn't see our physical universe as an obstacle at all. It may be able to walk right through a brick wall and there's nothing about it, and consider that magical within itself. And look at humans. If we had that ability to do it, we'd have been doing it a long time ago. What more fun is there to shortcut than to walk through the wall instead of through a doorway? So there are a lot of those experiences too. And, Sean, I think you brought up before this show started, look at some of these Bigfoot accounts where they've been shot at, and yet they just kind of vaporize and disappear. Look at the tracks that have been followed and then just suddenly stop. Where did it go? It can't jump, 300 feet. If it could, maybe it did, but it's just very compelling to try to figure this mystery out of where did it go. So the first answer we tend to come up with is, well, maybe it's a interdimensional being, or it lives in the space between spaces, and which was brought up in, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, or great Indiana Jones movie, which, by the way, I don't bash as much as so many people do. I kind of enjoyed that movie myself, but we're not going to go into the whole movie thing. But it brought up a good point. These beings may come from a space between spaces. You guys need to throw something in that here. I don't want to do all the talking, but
all right.
I mean, I could go down some rabbit holes here, Travis. Believe me, I can go down a lot of rabbit holes here.
Well, one question I have for you guys, and I mean, this is the question really that you could ask about any type of creature that we can't identify, but when do you think ultra-terrestrials may have initiated contact with our dimension?
Oh, that's a good question. I think
Right.
if you asked John Keel, and we'd have to get a Ouija board for that, unfortunately, I think John Keel would say they've always been here. And if you look at the quote I put up, and let me pull it up here quick, he was really under the belief that these beings have always been here, and that we may be the invaders, I guess, in this dimension. And that's something to think about. Did we just arrive here one day? I don't know. And of course, I want that, and I can't find it because that would be logical. That's usually how it goes. They are not from outer space. There is no need for them to be. They have always been here. John Keel said that. And I guess, Travis, to the point, if we take time out of the equation, we see time as linear. Maybe they don't have the same concept of time as we do because they might have conquered that. So truly they may have always been here because our concept of time is different. Like, who said a calendar year is a calendar year? We talk about the world, and the age of the world, and we put it into the context of the 365 and a quarter day, time frame, right? That's how we justify a year. When did that start? And were years always the same length of time, or yada yada? And that could go into a whole new thread itself, but the comprehension of time as we know it may not be the same for them.
Well, considering the fact that time is man-made, we came up with the concept, and you used that word concept earlier in your description there. And time is something that we conceive and is man-made. So we use simple mathematics of the Earth revolving around the sun, and that's time. But that doesn't mean time actually exists. It may be faster to us somewhere else. Now, Einstein has proved that. He's proved the fact that the faster you go, you start to lose time. And if you can push to the speed of light, you could actually hold time, or time starts to move backwards as you're traveling through it. It's like a plane going through the sound barrier. Once you break the barrier, you hear that boom, but then time itself would start to rotate backwards. Now, we're going down a completely different rabbit hole, but it all is relative to what we're talking about with other entities and beings. And I do like the John Keel effect that they've always been here. And somebody asked me the question a few weeks ago, well, what do you think Bigfoot is? And my first knee-jerk reaction is, I think Bigfoot might be the indigenous species to this planet. It's humans that are not. We are not adapted to this planet physically. We have to wear sunglasses to protect our eyes from the sun. We should wear sunscreen because it can cause cancer. There's all sorts of, we have to wear clothing depending on the climate, but you do not see creatures having these issues. They're protected from the environment in which they live. We're the only species that does not. We're very vulnerable to this environment. So maybe we're planted here, and the Bigfoot creature and all these ultra-terrestrial creatures may have been here the whole time. Mm-hmm. That's very possible, and we're the invaders. I like to, go down that rabbit hole and think of it, and I'm sorry I keep using the term rabbit hole, but that's pretty much where we go. But it's interesting to think about, because then it puts a whole different dynamic on this whole experience of the paranormal and ultra-terrestrials and other paranormal events like shadow people and like the Mothman and the Hat Man and Spring-Heeled Jack and everything else you can bunch into that category. Maybe that's the norm, and we're the abnorm. Maybe we're the paranormal to them.
Could almost take that down the same road as hauntings, particularly the residual non-intelligent hauntings, right? When people see them, it's like looking through watching it rewind, that these things are just kind of happening and existing, but non-interactive with us. So we're kind of seeing a playback. But are we? Are we really seeing a playback, or have we fallen into one of those dimensional tides, I guess, is a thought I have around it. Not trying to sound uneducated or, to be a rube about it, but there's so much of this we don't understand. There are many instances of, one could even say, an intelligent haunting, Vance, or a demon, quote unquote, that maybe not be so. They may be dimensional beings, ultra-terrestrials, right? And man, that gets a little uncomfortable if something could just randomly summon itself into our world and we encounter it. And if you go into the Bigfoot theory, Travis and Vance, the sightings of these things that, when they're following these tracks and the tracks just stop, I don't think Bigfoot learned to moonwalk with that accuracy. And there's no boot prints moving forward from it. These prints just stop. Well, where do they go? And then how do you justify the non-terrestrial sightings? They become justified themselves. It's really not up to us to determine that. This is what the facts show in this instance.
And one thing about this idea of ultra-terrestrials that is so fascinating is that for those who say, for the Bigfoot and for several other creatures, well, there's no body, this actually logically explains that. Why you would have footprints stopping of any creature, why there's no body. And it's not so far-fetched. The only thing limiting people from believing it is, like you said earlier, Sean, that we so often assume that if we haven't seen it and can't explain it, it's simply not real. And that, I think, really holds us back from experiencing some of these beings.
We need more science to explain science, or it's not science.
Yep.
And there are plenty of those that are researching science, but they kind of get mocked. And I shouldn't say kind of get mocked. They definitely get mocked. But they at least push forward in their science, because it does sound absolutely ridiculous. But then one day, ridiculous actually becomes a reality. And then you look back in history going, wow, that person was a genius. First off, they were a complete rube, like the term you used a few moments ago, Sean. And the next thing you know, they're a genius because they're thinking outside the box. And I try to do that. I am far from a genius, and I know that. And I'm a rube right now. I understand physics, and I understand a lot of this stuff, but to put it into an equation, it's hard for me to do. So all I can do is try to paint a picture that might make a little bit more sense, which brings me back to the point made earlier. These things may be flesh and blood, just able to move in a way that we can't. And they can move from another dimension to this dimension without a thought. It's just like walking into another room. And for us, we can't even figure out what the door is. Yeah. So,
we're not the only ones that feel this way. Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek postulated the theory that these, instead of having to have faster than light travel or anti-gravity, because nobody's been able to, really explain that well, that with interdimensional travel, it's the propulsion's unnecessary because you're existing between realities. You're traveling through the reality. So it's really not the propulsion that's the indicator, it's the capability. And it's I don't know. I think the more and more I research this, the interdimensional hypothesis becomes really interesting and rational if you can rationalize it to yourself. And if you can come to the self-actualization that, there is the potential probability of this, and you look at these UFO sightings, you look at the extraterrestrial, the abduction cases, the cryptid creatures that have no physical remains, as Travis pointed out, the interdimensional hypothesis becomes a lot more palatable.
Well, yes, it does become much more palatable. The struggle is, how do we even put our fingers through that, or at least try to find the doorway? And I know that's what we are struggling for right now. All we can do is talk about it. It gives people motivation to keep pushing forward to try to find maybe what that doorway is or where the doorway is located at. And I appreciate those people very much. I appreciate those that grow up from adolescence to adulthood and decide, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to figure out the answers to these questions because, look, as human race goes, this is what we do. We evolve. We just will not stop doing it. It's part of who we are. We can never have enough. We are always looking to make our lives much more convenient. And as a child, and when you guys were children, there was no such thing as DoorDash. How lazy are we making our society? So I appreciate those that want to push science and keep pushing it to get those answers, because I have a gut feeling. And when I say gut feeling, it is something very strong that all these encounters are probably all linked together somehow. There's a common thread that ties them all together somehow, whether they're all coming from the same place or different places, but all those different places are stuck together somehow, and they're able to move through all these different places. And with physics now, we're looking at time and space as a sheet of paper. To move from one dot on the piece of paper to another dot on the piece of paper, the fastest way is a straight line, unless you fold the paper in half. Now those two dots are touching each other, and now we need to figure out, if that's the case, how do you get through those dots without having to travel? Maybe whatever it is has a natural elementary ability to do that. And it wasn't science that they had to discover all this. It was just some part of their natural world that gave them the ability to be able to do this. And they may be exploring just like we're exploring. So, to look at the cases of, and I'm going to go back to the Mothman thing again, and all these cases, stating the fact, well, it had red glowing eyes. Well, maybe that's normal. I don't know. I find it crazy, but again, I'm not going to discount anybody for saying that. I put it in the pile of, it's plausible. Why not?
Well, Keel thought it was all related. I think towards the latter part of his tenure in the field and his research, he felt there was, and actually not even in the 70s, I guess late 70s when he wrote Operation Trojan Horse, linked to folkloric and supernatural concepts such as ghosts and demons, that to him it's all related. It's, all one big connection, and he may not have been off.
No, he may not be. Travis, what's your take?
Yeah, you were saying earlier there, Vance, if this is all connected and it is a matter of finding a doorway to try to contact them ourselves, I saw with some of my research here that John Keel mentioned he thought that magnetic anomalies help to explain how some of them travel between dimensions. Yeah. What are you guys' thoughts on ley lines and how they may or may not be linked to this?
I'm not very proficient with ley lines. I know what they are, but I haven't really stepped into that whole research yet. I don't think I'm that far down the road in order to take more into understanding of the correlation between the ley lines. Maybe, Sean, you're a little bit more apt to understanding that. I think it's very plausible. I know enough about them to think, yes, it is very plausible. And with the magnetic nature just of our physical globe itself that creates ley lines, there's a lot to be said for that. It didn't just happen by happenstance that here you have this magnetic field that is actually a coating of protection, so to speak. It's the planet condom that keeps all dangerous things from affecting us.
Interdimensional Trojan.
Well, and what was the name of John Keel's book again?
Operation Trojan Horse.
Well, there you go. So, see, it is all relative.
No, but Travis, you bring that up, and one of my old research partners, Ernie Delp, was big on ley lines and geological deposits in the earth that make certain areas more adept of retaining information, retaining energy, rather, and that's a lot of work is still being done into that field. I'm not discounting it. I think there's something to it. Why do certain areas on this planet have much stronger paranormal sense than others? Well, my friend, I think ley lines, magnetic fields, and geological structures have a lot to do with that. Everything on this planet has a rhyme or reason. I'm convinced. There's not one thing on this planet that's worthless. Again, we have to figure it out to comprehend it. But the more we ask and the more we research, the more we discover. And Travis, I don't think we're too far out from having some information that may prove that to be true.
You know, I would add to your ley lines question, Travis, the simple concept of the VHS cassette tape, which is magnetic particles on a filament. You have a device, now you put it in the device and voila, you get a picture and you can watch a movie. I understand that's old school, but it is the principle of maybe the ley lines were doing the same thing. Maybe it's a magnetic code of some sort and the interpreter is able to use that information for a particular purpose, much like the VHS tapes and cassette tapes, which actually was an ingenious idea to figure out, hey, we can take these particles and through magnetic impulses, they get arranged a certain way, and then we interpret it with this machine here, and the next thing you know, you can listen to audio, or you can listen to audio and video. Well, that's incredible. So maybe our planet is some sort of a cassette tape that is being interpreted depending on who wants to watch what's going on here.
Wow.
I just said
That's amazing
about the residual hauntings. You know, as it kind of segues right into that. Like it was.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah,
it was perfect, and it's just crazy to think about these possibilities because in a world where we're so desperately trying to prove things, a lot of times we take the simplest answer or the most unpopular answer and just throw it to the wolves because it doesn't fit within our conventions. And I think as somebody who's guilty of that from time to time, maybe I should start expanding my own horizons and start looking at these alternate possibilities as not just possibilities, but the potential answer.
And another thing too, Sean, along those lines that I have theorized, and again, this comes from Vance, the Larry theorist here.
Larry.
If we are jumping into these subject matters and we were to get the answer tomorrow morning, I think it would probably make us all short circuit and we would not be right and we would live out the rest of our lives in a padded room because it's way too much information for our minds to be able to comprehend everything we just witnessed.
Agreed.
So if you move into it slowly and you gradually start to absorb all this like a sponge slowly picking up water, you don't become overwhelmed by it. And it might be a good thing that we are moving at the pace that we are moving to make these discoveries. Yes, we're itching at the palm to get the answer, but you might not want to move too fast because we have to give our minds the ability to absorb the information and process it properly and put it in the right place in order for us to move even further down the road and explore a little bit more.
I think if we start to put a bow on this, what I've learned and my takeaway from it all is that John Keel was really ahead of his time. And I think when you look at guys like Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek, that very smart guys, right? None of those able to see, and they did research without the technology we have today, mind you. So these guys are postulating theory without the gained knowledge that we have today. put them in today's perspective, where we're at today with what we have, do you think we'd be further along in these sciences or these fields of study? I think so. And, at least I think Jacques Vallée is still alive, right? I mean, he could still have that potential. But this field tends to drive those people out.
Yeah, unfortunately it does. And, hopefully, and like you said, yes, I believe Jacques Vallée is still alive. And if anybody is not familiar with who he is, you can get a good representation of who he is from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because his representation was played out very well in that movie. And of course, he played the Frenchman. And I don't remember his name in Close Encounters now, but forgive me. But he has written so many books, and his dialogue in any kind of conventional meeting that he's had, it's absolutely mind-blowing. But everything he has said is very plausible. It's extremely plausible. So I don't think somebody like him or J. Allen Hynek, who was also in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, by the way. These guys are not pushed out. They're actually kind of superheroes in the field. They are the godfathers of this field because they thought outside the box. And now we're getting closer to looking inside the box going, wow, maybe everything that they philosophize is actually real.
Everything you know is wrong. Go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, to your question, Sean, about do we think that we'd be farther along had we really paid attention to these guys more, had the entire scientific field used what they found moving forward? Yeah, I think we'd be leaps and bounds ahead of where we are if more people took it seriously and paid attention to these pioneers and let the science lead where it leads, however far-fetched it might feel as they're doing it.
Absolutely. I don't think that we often enough think about potential before we alienate. And I guess that's where, we kind of get stuck. That just because, and I said it earlier, we can't comprehend it, it's not possible. We have to start learning how to comprehend again and to open our minds and to absorb and accept this stuff as, these potential scenarios may in fact be fact. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves and saying, well, Bigfoot is definitely an interdimensional creature. We still need proof. We still need potential. However, you learn nothing by isolating fact from your research. So keep an open mind, I guess. And let's be generous about what we're researching, but let's not be blind to it either.
Which is why I do enjoy listening to witness testimony. As crazy as it may sound, and what's really kind of interesting is a lot of these witnesses will use those terms when they go to describe what they experienced. I'm going to sound crazy if I tell you this. That is a big indicator right off the bat that, I'll put that, at least I will file it in a research book. Let's take a closer look at it because, it might sound crazy, but it may very well be worth taking a closer look at. Why is it that very credible people, and I'm talking very credible people, have had experiences and are hesitant, but they do come forth and they'll share that experience, and somebody else that you just think, you came from, the wrong side of the tracks and you have a problem and you're not focused properly. Why are both of those stories so close in the experience itself? And I'll take for an example, an orb. I've seen orbs. I know other people, very credible people that have seen orbs, and they've been in close proximity to them. And there's videos of them. What are they and where are they coming from? Okay, so let's start taking a look at that from a scientific point. It could be Canada, and we'll thank Corey for that.
Thanks. One of our listeners.
Yes. But the point is, so it's something, and we don't know. It may very well be just a very natural product of this planet, just because we don't understand it. Can you imagine the people that sailed the ocean blue hundreds of years ago that saw the phytoplankton for the first time and they see the water lighting up at night, and they go, we must be on a different planet. But it could very well be that these orb sightings are kind of a similar thing. We just don't understand it yet. Yet I truly believe that they've been here ever since the dawn of time, that whatever these orbs are, whether they are intelligent control or whether it's just part of our physical experience here on this planet, it may very well be.
I'll add to that the dawn of our perceived time.
Yeah.
Yes, because time is man-made. This is true. Time didn't exist when man first set foot on land, did it? No, we had to think about it and come up with something concept. All we knew is that, at some point it got bright outside, and other points it got dark outside. No, and then it gets light again, and then it gets dark, and it seems to do this on a regular basis. So maybe we can go, it will probably be dark soon because it usually happens right about now. We need to do this, and the next thing you know, we evolve into making a calendar and sundials, and we pattern everything. And man's existence is all based on patterns. We pattern everything because it makes our existence a little bit easier.
Creatures of habit.
Very much so.
Travis,
so are these ultra-terrestrials creatures of habits? But yeah, Travis, go ahead. Ask your question.
Okay. Didn't have one, but I'll make one up.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
When in doubt, improvise. That's the first.
No, I meant, Sean, you were going to ask Travis a question. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, way to screw it up, Vance. No, what I was saying was that Travis, listening to Vance there, I actually think he created the concept and sold time.
It's amazing.
Very possible.
Tremendous. I think that means you win this season, Vance. So congratulations.
Yes, I did. Well, you heard the bell go off, so I will take my prize money and go home. Yes.
Well, the joke's
I
on
win.
You were going to make up a question. I was anxious to hear what you were making up.
Yes. Yeah, no problem. Okay. It's a rabbit hole thing, but it is interesting to note that what we tend to do, to the point of creating time, is when we see something we don't understand, the first thing we try to do is comprehend it. Once we do that, we then try to control it, which is very interesting to me, especially when wondering what we would do with with ultra-terrestrials, if we discovered beyond a shadow of a doubt with proof that they existed. What would we do?
Try to control
them. Would we try to control them? Or,
actually try to take the technology and use it. That's what I think. And then just think about the perspective of history and how much stuff could be screwed up because we figured it out. Then that's going to go to a show we're going to do later on this season. So let's not jump into that. But that's a hell of a thought, and we can't go too far down that rabbit hole. We'll ruin it for the listeners. But
very well done. And like you said, what would we want to do? We would want to control it. But how would that be different from an ultra-terrestrial? It probably has the same motives. It wants to control it. Whatever it is exploring, it discovers it and goes, I want to control it. And going back to our previous episode, maybe that's what abductions are all about. It's learning how to control. And who knows? If we do it, why wouldn't they? It seems to be, like you said, creature of habit, and maybe all creatures of intelligent thought process may all have that same desire to control it. So yeah, that's a really good point, Travis. Yeah, you get the prize now. Hang on. There you go.
Hey, all right, I get a bell.
Absolutely. I think we ought to wrap this up, gentlemen. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to, thank all of our listeners and please give us your contributions. You can always reach out to us, and Sean, please give out the information and where our wonderful listeners can contact us at if they have any points that they would like to bring up. And of course, they will get a shout out on one of our episodes that they are contributing to this discussion.
Absolutely. First thing I'd like to point out is that we're a very socially active group. You can find us on Facebook at the Supernormal Cast, because it wouldn't let us use Supernormal. I'm going to bitch about that every day until it comes to fruition. Irritates me. But you can find us on Twitter at SuperNRML. You can find us on Instagram, Supernormalcast, or you can email us if you still choose to email, supernormalcast@gmail.com, and connect with us, please. We're growing rapidly. I'm so happy to see you guys reaching out to us, but do not be afraid to ask questions or to post or to get in the deep with us. We're here for you, and we grow these shows and make these shows better by your input. This show is truly for you, the listener, and it only works when you participate.
Well, back to me. Yeah, if anybody is really inquisitive with any kind of comments or questions or insults, I'm open to everything. But anybody can reach out to me through Facebook at vancenesbitt.com, and feel free to contact me there. Or you can find me on Instagram, which is Vance_Nesbitt_NRML. And you can ask questions over there too. I'm an open book, and if you can stump me, that would be great, because I'm easily stumped, and then you can laugh. But you know what? I enjoy the interaction with everybody, so I encourage you to reach out and contact us through the information that Sean gave you, through the Supernormal Cast, and get in touch with me, please. And of course, if your subject is quite fascinating enough, we want to put our arms around you and have you on the show with us, and we'll all discuss the Super NRML. Travis, where can people reach out and contact you?
All right. Well, everyone can find me on Facebook. Just search Travis Corder and Williamsport, PA. I've been doing some writing lately, looking at the comedy scene, especially locally, and I'll be sharing a lot more stuff from Super NRML in the near future here. So look forward to connecting with you all. Thanks for listening.
All right. So what we have a tradition at doing here at Super NRML is we like to put our percentages in about the subject matter in which we are talking about, from a scale of 1 to 100. And I will call for tonight our percentages of what is the plausibility of ultra-terrestrials coming from another dimension to our universe and to our reality. From 1 being, nah, not so much, to 100 being absolutely. Sean, what's your take?
89%.
89%. That's pretty high. Travis.
I'm going to go with 75% on this one, which I think is one of my highest to date, or the highest to date. In part because, it explains the existence of other beings, in my opinion, a little better than interstellar travel. So, yeah, I'm going to say 75%.
Not bad. As far as myself, I think I'm going to have to brush shoulders with Sean and say about 89%. So, good philosophy, Sean. Looks like you win that round too. How about that?
Okay, I have my belt.
Yeah, I call at 89% probability that we are close to getting the answer, and we will get the answers someday. And we are currently searching with some really cool technology that's floating around in space right now, which we didn't get into because it wasn't relative, but we're closely getting there.
Very nice. Very nice. Folks, I'm Sean, the Fork Chop Forker. Find me on Facebook at Sean Forker and on Twitter. You've been listening to Super Normal. We'll catch you next week. Thank you for coming along to this week's event. Remember, if by chance you get an odd feeling and something doesn't seem right, don't be alarmed by it. It's just the Super Normal.